DIYers, what's going on? Mike Borders with the Mike Borders channel. Thank you for watching. We're talking boats today, and we're going to replace the transom water tube as well as the inboard hose. Let's get started. Here we are outside, and it's a windy summer afternoon. Temperature's nice though. Let's head to the boat. Here we are at the boat. This is my grandma's 1989 glass port, and it was once owned by my aunt and uncle. Let's head to the back of the boat and get started. To the back of the boat, and here is our transom, again with the entire outdrive, the bell housing, and bellows all removed. There's the trim cylinders, and down below that's the exhaust, and to the right of that there's the shift cable housing. And here's the insert where the gimbal bearing seats into, and the rear seal. And deep inside there is where your yoke shaft goes into the engine coupler. That is inside the engine. And directly above that, there is our water tube. Again, we're going to remove that. And again, in our case, ours is plastic. It does come in metal. However, that rubber bushing right inside there needs to be replaced, because over time, it can warp, it can dry rot, and begin allowing water inside the hull. That's not what you want. What we'll do now is hop inside the boat. Inside the boat now, and here is our 3.0 Mercruiser inboard. And again, it feeds power to the outdrive, Alpha 1 Gen 1. And coming down to the front portion of the engine, here's the thermostat, and it has a 90-degree angle elbow fitting that goes into our rubber hose, which is right here, and then you've got a standard worm gear clamp right there. And that feeds all the way to the back of the engine and down, where it will go down below to the back side of the engine into the opposite end of our water tube. I'm going to zip tie some wires up and out of our way and get started. Coming inside, I've got a 5/16 socket on an extension, and I need to remove the hose first, because without removing that hose, we can't actually access the top bolt. So again, we are going to loosen this up, and that's pretty loose. Clamp is loose, as you can see here. And it might be a little tough, because just by feeling the hose, the water tube itself goes all the way up to this point right here where my thumb is. So just kind of carefully pull it out. There we go. And I'll raise the camera just a bit. I'm going to shift this hose all the way up and over to get it out of the way. And there is the opposite end of the tube. Next, I've got the 7/16 socket on the ratchet, and I'm going to loosen these bolts. And the bolts themselves just shy of 1 inch tall. After you remove both screws, just carefully pull up and remove the cover, as you can see here. Here's a close-up of it. I'm now going to scroll in. What we'll do next is hop out of the boat, go to the opposite end, and push it in from the transom side. As you just saw, we broke it loose from the opposite side, and I'll pull this out just a bit. And from here, I need to cut away that bushing, because right now, the angle of the tube on the exterior portion inside the transom is positioned in a way that is impossible to pull through this hole. And as this bushing goes in, it gets larger in diameter, which also makes it extremely difficult to pull outward. So again, we're going to cut away this bushing. With the bushing cut, it makes it a lot easier to slide off of this hose, as you can see here. There's the bushing. From here, I can basically go back to the inner portion of the exterior transom and pull this tube through. Outside the boat, coming back inside the transom, and again, carefully remove your water tube. And DIYers, there it is. And inspecting this right now, looks pretty good. Looks empty, nothing clogging it, no cracks. And I tried to buy a replacement water tube, but there's a back order on them. I'm not sure why. I wanted the OEM exact replacement part. So with that said, I'm going to clean this up and reuse it. Back inside the boat, where we remove the cover for the water tube, and directly below that you'll see a hole, and that is where your U-joint shaft slides all the way through the rear hull and into the engine coupler. From here, we are going to direct our attention to the hose that we removed from the water tube. And again, it feeds all the way up here to a fitting. However, first, check your hose for any zip ties. As you can see, we have one here, which, believe it or not, is the wiring for our trim limit and sender. So we are going to snip that. Now to the opposite side of the engine, here's our carburetor. And again, that hose feeds all the way up and to the side of the top portion of the engine and into an elbow fitting there, and is secured by a clamp. In our case, 5/16, or you can try a flathead screwdriver and loosen that clamp. Camera is now positioned in front of the engine, and again, I'm just going to loosen up that clamp. Now to a close-up of the hose. Again, here is the elbow fitting that it secures onto. Two things I recommend before yanking this hose off the fitting. Number one, carefully, without cutting anything else in the process, make a cut in the hose where it secures onto the fitting. That is going to make it a lot easier to remove. And as you can see, I've cut all the way through, and I can basically peel it up, which again makes it a lot easier to remove from the fitting. In addition, the second thing is coming midway, basically where it slides by the carburetor area, you have a small little loop or hook that the hose feeds into. And if you want to, you can remove that. However, in our case, we're just going to carefully shift the hose through that loop or hook and out without damaging it. Back to the front, what I'll do is just carefully peel the hose that I cut and push it off the elbow fitting, as you can see here, and up and out. Again, without damaging anything. I'll grab that clamp so it doesn't fall where I don't want it to. I'll set that aside, and I'll carefully pull the hose through. And to a close-up of that lower hook we were just talking about, just carefully pull the hose through it. And you'll notice on the tail end as well, the hose gets in a tight spot, so just carefully help it through any tight spots as you pull this up and out. And DIYers, that is a long hose, and our replacement hose is 44 inches. And yeah, it kind of looks like that. And real quick, another view of that loop or hook. It's just secured on with a bolt shown right there. But again, as you saw, you can carefully remove that hose without removing this hook. Outside the boat, and here's everything we just removed. Again, that long hose, and what I did was re-secure the clamps to them so I don't lose them. And what I'll do is I'll take everything inside, I'll clean up that old water tube and install a new bushing and prepare this to be reinstalled inside the boat, inside of the workstation. And check this out, we've got our brand new 44-inch hose. And in comparison with the old one, which is on top with the clamp still installed, you will notice it's much longer. Again, as mentioned before, we will need to make a cut, and down below in the comment section as well as description section are cutters to cut that hose, and you want as clean and straight of a cut as possible. And we are going to use the original clamps, in our case either a 5/16 socket, which we have on the ratchet, or a flathead screwdriver to loosen those up and remove them from the old hose. In addition, links down below in the comment section as well as description section will be there to purchase new parts. This is the cover, there's the old one, here's the old bushing we cut, there's the water tube, here's the brand new bushing, here's the part number and bushing. And one side of the hose will connect to the water tube that's inside the boat, and the opposite end of the hose will feed all the way up to the top of the engine and into the thermostat. And then this portion right here will feed through the hull of the boat and into the transom and connect to an additional rubber hose, which is 3/4 inch size, and feed all the way to this fitting right here, which goes right inside there. However, I'm going to reposition the camera and extend these hoses as straight as possible to get a proper measurement of the old hose. And I did just that. As you can see, got the tape measure, and I used that tool to basically straighten it out just a bit. I'm showing 34 and maybe 5/8, just shy of 35 inches. We are going to make a cut on the brand new hose, maybe about 37 inches. And then if it's too long inside the boat, as it probably will be with 37 inches, we can cut away the excess to make a perfect length for the connections. The last thing you want to do is cut it too short in the beginning and have to buy a new hose. DIYers, that would not be fun. And as far as the hose number, there it is. This will also be down below in the comment section as well as description section on where to purchase that. At this point, I placed the brand new hose between the tape measure and old hose. And I am going to cut around the 37, maybe 38. 38 might be too long. But again, I want to cut longer and work my way back as opposed to too short and not have the option to extend the hose. Time to cut. I've grabbed the tool, and to unlock it, just pinch in and up on the little locking latch here. Go ahead and stow that. And here is the cutting tool. Check that out. And the tool itself has a circular mold to it to allow you to grab the circular hose and position it inside this little cutout to give you a clean cut with the blade as it makes its way through the hose. So again, I'm going to cut around 37, maybe 37 and a half right there and work my way back. Well, maybe 38 just to be safe. Really sink that hose inside the circular cutout here as shown and grab a hold of the handle and cut. Tape measure fell, but I don't think I need it at this point. And I'll set that aside. And again, got about 3, maybe 3.5, 4 inches more with the new hose, and we'll work ourselves back. Next, I'll go ahead and carefully lock the tool, set that aside. And I'm going to grab my ratchet and socket. I've got the 5/16 socket on it. And again, you can use a flathead screwdriver or a 5/16 ratchet. And I'm just going to loosen up these clamps and remove them from the hose. And I might clean them up just a little bit before I install them on the new hose. Now to the opposite side. Next, I installed the original or old clamps on the hose. Just clean them up a bit. Again, those are the old ones. And I went about 2 inches in to the hose and secured them. What we'll do next is open up the new cover and bushing. And we need to prep that water tube for installation in the boat. At this point, I've got the new parts unpackaged. Here is the new bushing. And again, here's the old one we cut off. New cover, old cover. We are going to use the original bolts. I will swap those over to the new cover now. And I'm going to remove the old cover and old bushing and throw those away. From here, let's head back to the boat, install the water tube, bushing, cover, and that long hose we just cut. Back to the boat and to the transom. And in regards to how you slide this water tube into place, the inner portion will angle up and the outer portion will angle to the 9 o'clock position or face the 9 o'clock position. And go inside the hole carefully. And basically, that's all you have to do. From here, we'll go inside the boat and install the bushing and cover. Back inside the boat and coming to where the water tube comes through the transom and hull. Again, verify it is positioned in a way where that side of the water tube is angled or facing up. Next, DORs, it is time to lubricate and install the new bushing on the water tube. And I'll scroll the camera out just a bit, and we are going to use the SAE 90 gear lube. And all I will do with the cap on, obviously, is tip it upside down and tip it back upright, remove the cap, and I will use just gear lube that attached to the inner portion of the cap to lubricate the bushing. And I'm going to go inside the bushing, and this is going to allow us to slide it on the water tube very nicely. I'm also going to lubricate the outer portions, and that will help the cover create a watertight seal. Bushing is now lubricated. Camera is now positioned to show you the water tube again as it makes its way through the transom and the hull. You want to make sure it is in the angled up position as shown here. Next, we'll grab the bushing, and here's the bushing. And DIYers, take note of the position of the bushing to ensure you install it on the water tube properly. The larger portion diameter of the bushing will be closest to the inboard engine. And as the bushing extends outward and gets smaller in diameter, that portion will go inside the hole and face the transom and outdrive. And again, when we put that cover on and secure it with the 2 bolts, it will create that watertight seal. Bushing is now on, and all I'm going to do is slide it down. I'm going to do my best to do it with one hand so I can show you what I'm doing. But it is tough, it may need both hands. Alright, at this point I've slid the bushing onto the water tube as shown here. The tube is still in the upright or angled up position, and not sure if you can hear it, but it is raining hard right now. Thank goodness we're in a garage. So again, from here we'll grab the cover, and when installing the cover I'm going to position it where the part number will be on bottom as shown there. Next we'll bolt it in place, and this can be a little tricky. Just bear with me as I align this and begin screwing it in. Do not cross thread these bolts, that would not be good. Take your time, be precise. At this point I've begun to hand tighten both of the bolts, top and bottom. And from from here, we'll grab a ratchet and socket and tighten these in sequence. And what I mean by that is 2 to 3 turns on the top bolt and then 2 to 3 turns on the bottom bolt, back up to the top, 2 to 3, down to the bottom, 2 to 3 turns. And by doing that, it will properly seat the inner bushing to again create that watertight seal. And I find it easier just to use a deep socket without the ratchet just yet. Now transitioning to the ratchet and socket, 7/16 size in our case. Now to a close-up, making progress. Those bolts are secured and that bushing has created that watertight seal. Now let's go back outside of the boat to the transom and see how the opposite end of the water tube is positioned. And if it's too far in or too far out, we can adjust it. To the water tube, you want a gap in between the bottom portion of your water tube and the top portion housing here that the gimbal bearing secures into, as well as a gap in between the rear portion of the transom and the water tube. And the reason being is because you need that space to install that brand new rubber water hose when it comes that time. And take a quick view of the bushing inside that hole that again creates that watertight seal at that point inside the transom. Taking a step back, in fact, I'll grab my brand new water hose and I'm going to insert it inside here just to ensure that this hose has the clearance to attach onto that water tube. In our case, it does have the clearance both on bottom, on top, and on either side of that tube. However, we are not going to install the hose at this point. I'll take that off. We'll head back inside the engine and attach that long hose to the opposite end of this water tube. Now to the top of the inboard engine, and the way I'm going to insert this hose is right through this gap, and I'll just slide this all the way back through. Again, when it comes to that point where that inner loop or hook is, you want to make sure you slide it inside there. And I'll continue sliding that hose to the back portion where that water tube is. And again, as you slide this hose through that hook or loop, you need to take that clamp off, because that clamp will not make it easy, or in other words, it may make it impossible to slide this hose into position where you need it. And once I get the hose all the way back down to the water tube, I'll slide that clamp back on. With the hose in position, I'm going to grab some SA90 gear lube, same gear lube that we use to lubricate that inner bushing, and that will help us slide that hose on much more efficiently. And you will notice this little wire right here, that is for our trim sender, and I'm bringing the hose underneath it, and I'm going to carefully slide the hose on the water tube. At this point, the hose is now in position on the water tube, and get a good feel where that water tube is inside the hose. You want to do your best to slide that hose as far onto the tube as possible, basically where it makes the turn here. And if you can carefully slide it on further, great, but do not break your plastic water tube. From here, I will slide the clamp down, and you see a little bulge or bevel portion. That is the end portion of the water tube. I'm going to slide the clamp, and I may need to loosen it up just to slide it over that bulge. And in between the bulge and the end of the hose, go ahead and tighten your clamp. And I want to position the clamp in a way where it makes it easy to screw it on tight, as well as loosen it to remove it down the road when it comes time to service this. And again, we have a 5/16, and I'll tighten that. You want it snug, but DIYers do not over tighten this, because you do not want to rip the hose nor crack the water tube. And a close-up of the finished product. Again, do not over tighten that clamp. You'll run into ripping the hose or cracking the tube. Not good. To the opposite side of the engine, and there is a view from this end going all the way down to the water tube. And as it makes its way to the top of the engine, again, it goes through that loop or hook and to the opposite end of the hose. Again, we cut long so we could work our way back, as opposed to the other option, cutting too short and not having the option. And what we'll do is maybe cut off 2 inches and slide it in place and see if that works. And again, looking down below where the fitting is right here, I want to cut my way back. And keep in mind, you don't want the hose just to come flush with the outer portion of the fitting. You want the hose long enough to go onto the fitting and slide all the way back to the stopping point, basically at the 90-degree angle turn on this elbow fitting. You can't see it now, but I'll show it to you here shortly. That's how much I took off, about 2 inches. And I want to maneuver this hose in a way where I can get it into this area here. And as far as the cut, it looks pretty good. However, first, just like the opposite end, I'll use some gear lube to lubricate that fitting to help slide the hose on. And sorry if I get in your way. Now to a close-up, and again I need to position that clamp here shortly, but I want to show you down below. Here is that 90-degree angle elbow fitting right here, and I have positioned the hose all the way onto the fitting and flush with the stopping point of the elbow. Basically this big block right here where it makes the turn and makes its way into the thermostat as shown here. From here, I will loosen up this clamp and I will slide it over and into place and secure the hose. Clamp in place, and I am tightening it. Again, do not over tighten it, you will damage the hose. And here's where I have positioned the clamp to allow me to access it from this angle of the engine. Back down below where the elbow is, and you can see as far as where the clamp is positioned, there is a small portion of hose in between the clamp and the elbow fitting, and that is what you want. As well as the fitting itself that extends outward and makes that bulge. It's right there on the outer portion of the clamp. And as far as the hose, again, it is inside that loop, and no portion of this hose is touching the hot portion of the engine, which will only extend the life of this hose. Taking a step back, and DIYers, that is it. We really hope this helped, and we have a lot more to do. Scrolling above right now is a video link that will basically continue right where we left off. And what we need to do next is hop out of the boat, back to the transom, and install the water hose on the opposite end of the water tube, as well as install brand new bellows, install the bell housing, and the outdrive. Again, a lot more to do. Hope you join us. From here, do us a favor. Below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching.